So, so guys, in our last session yesterday, we have discussed, right, what is primary key, key attribute, foreign key attribute, and the index attribute. We have also discussed, right, how to implement, right, composite primary key as well as how to implement composite foreign key. Then we have also discussed how to create indexes, how we can create composite indexes, how we can create multiple indexes on a single database table. So today we are going to discuss, right, inverse property, required attribute, not mapped attribute, max length, min length attribute, right? So some of these things we are going to discuss in today's session. So let us start the today's session. Let's start with the inverse property attribute. So what is inverse property attribute? Why we need inverse property attribute? How to work with inverse property attribute? Let us try to understand with one real-time example, right? So guys, remember, right? So whenever we are working with a relationship means what? We need to define some navigation property in the both end of the entities, right? Suppose we are having two entities. One is principal entity, another one is dependent entity. In the principal entity, we need to establish, we need to provide some right navigation property, as well as in the dependent entity, we also need to provide the navigation property, right? And based on the navigation property, the foreign key is going to be created and the relationship is going to be established, right? So that is fine. Thing that what you need to remember is if there is only one relationship between two entities, right? For example, entity A and entity B, and I want to establish only one relationship between them, then by default, entity framework core can determine what is the relationship between them, and accordingly, he can create the foreign key. But whenever we want to establish more than one relationship, right, between the same two entities, then entity framework core cannot automatically define, right, or determine where and how the two entities are going to be related to each other. So in situations like this, right, we need to use inverse property. If this is not clear at the moment, definitely it is going to be a little tricky to understand. Don't worry, right? I will, right, once I give the real-time example, real-time scenario, then you will understand what do you mean by defining more than one relationship between two entities. And then I will show you why it is not possible by default. And then I will show you how we can use inverse property to manage the right relationship between two entities when there are right more than one relationship. Let us try to understand this with one real-time example. So what we are going to do is we are going to create two entities. One is teacher and another one is right courses. A teacher can teach multiple courses and a course can also be taught by multiple teacher. Okay, so let us try to understand this example. So here what I'm going to tell you is teacher is going to be my principal entity and the course is going to be my dependent entity. A teacher can teach multiple courses. So here teacher is the principal entity and the course is going to be my dependent entity. So let me first create this teacher and courses entity. Okay, so teacher entity is there. Okay, let me modify this teacher entity. So this is going to my teacher entity. Here you can see teacher ID, teacher name, and right, online courses. Let's assume this teacher is providing some online courses. So here you can see this is I collection of a course, but instead of saying course, right course, I'm providing this entity as online courses. Similarly, I want to define the course entity. So go to the course entity. You can find here, this is my course entity. And here I have defined course ID, course name, description. And here, this is my right reference navigation property. And this is going to my, what I can say, this is going to be my foreign key by default. Why? Because related entity plus ID. So this is my related entity plus ID. So by default, this is going to be my foreign key. This is going to be my primary key and this is also in this table, this is going to be primary key. So now tell me, what is the relationship between teacher and the courses? Teacher and online courses. A teacher can teach multiple online courses. That is, what is the relationship? One to many. One teacher can teach a collection of courses. Collection means many. So one teacher can teach multiple courses, and at this point of time, a course can be taught by only one online teacher at this point of time. Later, I will show you how to establish multiple relationship. But now there is only one relationship between teacher and courses. What is that relationship? Now, one course can, guys, give me 1 minute, right? So there is only one relationship, that is one teacher can teach multiple online courses and one course can be taught by only one online teacher. So here you can see there is one-to-one relation application properties. One is collection type and another one is reference type. So means what? Means there is one-to-many relationship between teacher and courses. So this kind of a relationship automatically Entity Framework Code manage. Right? So there is no issue in creating the foreign key and maintaining the relationship, right? So let us proceed and modify the context object. And right, so see, till now we have not discussed inverse property. Why? Because the situation is not yet arises to use the inverse property. So let us first see whether the relationship is going to be managed by the framework automatically or not. So here you can see this is my courses division property and this is my teacher division property. And the database is going to be EF core DB. So let me first delete this one. Okay. Now let me generate the migration file as migration MH1. Is there any already existed migration with this name? Yes, so it will not allow. So let me delete this migration folder altogether. Then update data. So this kind of relationship automatically going to be managed by the right. And you can see the migration is applied. Now let us check the database, right? Whether it is creating the relationship or not. So this is my database. Table folder expand. So here you can see courses and here you should see the teacher ID, online teacher ID for entity. That means the relationship is managed automatically. That is fine. Now what is our requirement? Now, if you look at the entities, so these are my entities. So here, if you look at the entities, now the course is teach by only one online teacher. Now what is my requirement? I want to expand the functionality. Functionality means there are two teacher, same course. One teacher can teach online. The same course can be taught by one online teacher. At the same time, right, the same course can also be taught by one offline teacher. Right. So basically, there are two types of a teacher. They can teach the same course. Right. So let me introduce. Right. So this is going to my offline course, and this is going to my offline teacher ID. So now, so in this case, right, how many foreign keys are going to be created? One is online teacher ID, another one is offline teacher ID. And this foreign key is a optional foreign key because we are putting this question mark, right? The same course can be taught by one online teacher as well as the same course can also be taught by one offline teacher, right? So now here also what I want to do is I also want to define the right navigation property. So in this case, this is going to be my offline courses. That is, a teacher can teach a collection of online courses as well as a collection of offline courses. And here, a course can be taught by one online teacher as well as one offline teacher. That means now, how many relationship are there? How many relationship in the sense in the dependent entity? How many foreign keys we are creating?
Two.
Two. And these two foreign keys is pointing to the same right principal entity or different principal entity. So this online teacher ID created using this online teacher navigation property. This offline teacher ID it is going to be created based on this offline teacher navigation property. So both this reference navigation property that IP is the same or different.
Same.
Then that means this online teacher ID, once it is created as a foreign key, this foreign key is going to point to the teacher's table or not. Again, this offline
Yes.
teacher ID is also going to point to this teacher
Same
foreign
teacher.
teacher's table or not.
Yes.
And now inside this teacher entity, we can see I'm having online courses as well as I'm having offline courses. So in situations like this, entity framework cannot determine the relationship. When there is more than one relationship between the same entities, then the entity framework cannot determine the relationship. Why? Because now you can see this online teacher ID. Should I map with the online courses or offline courses? The entity framework get confused. This offline teacher ID, should I map with this online courses or offline courses? The entity framework get confused because we have not provided enough information that this courses, this online teacher ID should map to with this online courses, or this offline teacher ID should map with this offline courses. Did we provide any such kind of informations?
No, sir.
And the entity framework is
Sir,
not God. What we
ma'am,
think he
how
cannot
to
do. We need to provide the information to entity framework code. So with this is the scenario where, right, what I can say, inverse property will come into the picture. Right now, if I try to generate the migration file, then I will get that error, that ambiguity error. Ambiguity error means, right, there are, right, unable to determine the relationship. Right? So let us try to run. So what I'm saying, the exception, unable to determine the relationship represented by right, what I can say, navigation property. So in this case, so whatever the navigation property we defined here in the dependent entity, online teacher or offline teacher, the framework cannot determine the relationship between the teacher entity. If I map this online teacher with this offline courses or online courses, he is unable to determine.
sir, one
Clear?
question.
Yes, please.
Sir, if you give the name for the foreign keys, I think it will work or not.
Sorry?
If I assign a name of the foreign key, then it will work or not.
In this case, what foreign key you need to assign? Inside this foreign key table, you have to provide this entity name, or inside this foreign key, you have to provide, or here, if you apply foreign key, you have to provide this property name. Here, you apply, you have to provide this. So, this is not the issue, is not related to the foreign key. The issue is related to the relationship. So, how this online teacher will map to this online courses? Is there any information provided? So what you are
Um,
talking, that is not the issue. So what you are talking that I can apply the foreign key attribute here, something like this. So you are talking something like this, right? Foreign
yes.
key attribute, and to this
Um,
foreign key attribute, I need to provide this one,
yes, ma'am.
right? So you are asking something like this, right? Otherwise,
Yes.
what you can do, you can apply this one. Okay, so let me do this also. So this is what you are talking about. So you can apply this foreign key on the right scalar property as well as on the navigation property. If I'm applying on the navigation property, I have to provide the scalar property ID, whatever the scalar property. If I'm applying on the scalar property, I have to provide the related navigation. The issue is not with the foreign key. Right? So in this case, right, with these changes, if I try to do the same thing again, right, it should not work, right? Because the issue is not here. The issue is if I'm creating this foreign key online teacher, how this online teacher is related to this online courses or offline courses? It cannot be related to two. See, if there is only one, no issue. But now there are two navigation property in both the entities and pointing to each other. So this is the scenario, right? Entity framework cannot determine. Okay, so you just tell me how you can, so is this possible that, can you tell me whether this online teacher is mapped, is going to map with the online courses or offline courses? Any information is there?
No.
No. So in situations like this, right, what I need to do is I need to use inverse property attribute. And guys, remember the inverse property attribute is only going to be used on the navigation property, either on the principal entity or in the dependent entity. So now what I need to do is I can apply the inverse property here. So here I'm applying the inverse property. If I'm applying the inverse property here, then what is the corresponding related entities navigation property that what I need to provide? So online courses, I want this online teacher to be related with online courses. Similarly, this is my navigation property, right? So here what I need to do, offline teacher. Offline teacher is going to be linked with offline courses. So now what exactly we are telling? We are telling this offline, this online teacher is going to be related with online courses. So now the entity framework know, yes, this is online teacher and this is online courses. Now I have to establish the relationship. Now this is offline teacher and this is offline courses. Now I have idea how to establish the relationship and how to create the foreign key. So with these changes, Now, if you go to this inverse property, then you will see there is only one parameter that this inverse property attribute is taking, that is the property name. This property name is nothing but the navigation property name representing other end of the same relationship. The navigation property name representing the other end of the same relationship. That means what? Now, if I'm applying this here, then this property should map with what other end navigational relationship. Add the property name I need to specify here. Clear or not,
Yes, sir.
guys? Clear or any
Yes,
question?
clear, clear.
Right now. Now, what I can do is I can see whether now this is generating the right migration file or not. Okay. Now migration file is created. Now let me update the database. Clear? Now, if you verify, if you refresh this thing, then you should see the right table with the respective, right? What I can say, courses table is going to have two columns: online teacher ID and offline teacher ID. Clear?
Yes,
Yes or no? Now, instead of applying this on the dependent entity, can I apply on the principal entity? Yes, that is also possible. So take this one, go to the teacher entity, place this one here, place this one here. Online courses related property is online teacher. So that online teacher I need to provide here. And for offline courses, what is the offline teacher property, right? That related other end related navigation property I need to provide. So once I provide here, I can simply remove here. From here, I can remove, and I have already removed from here, right? So with these changes, now also generate the migration file and it should work as expected. Right? So now refresh the database, and this time also you will see the same thing. Clear?
Foreign
yes.
key attribute also we have to give.
Clear or not? Anyone having any question? What is this, right? Inverse property, how to use inverse property? Can I apply the inverse property on the right in the principal entity? Can I apply the inverse property on the right, what I can say, in the dependent entity? Yes. Clear?
Sir, we have to give foreign key attribute also.
Completely different. Foreign key is complete. So in this case, what will be the foreign key? That name I'm providing here. So foreign key, it is related to the dependent entity where I'm creating the foreign key. But how the foreign key is related to the other end? That's what we need to define using the inverse property. See, for example, here online teacher ID. So if we, instead of online teacher ID, if I provide the see, in this case, right, if I
Yeah, right.
provide the online tech ID,
Hmm.
what I need to do, I need to provide here,
Hmm.
right? If I remove this one, then also there is no issue. Why? Because by default, whatever the related property name plus ID is going to be the foreign key, and that is what we are following. If we are not following the default naming convention, then only I need to use the foreign key. For
Okay.
example, online teacher ID. So is this online teacher ID? No, online tech ID. So if, whenever there is a difference, then I need to specify that the foreign key is going to be this one, right? So with these
Okay.
changes, if I run the application, sorry, if I generate the migration file, now it is going to generate, right, online tech ID as the foreign key, right? So let me show you
Yeah.
this thing also. Migration file, right? Now refresh the database and see online tech ID is there instead of a
Yes.
teacher ID. Clear or not?
Yes. So one more thing. One teacher can teach many courses. Similarly, one course can be taught by many teachers, right? So many to many relation.
In this case, what we are providing now, one course is not going to be taught by many teachers. So in this case, one course can be taught by either one online teacher and an offline teacher.
Then this relation is not correct, no? Because in teacher we have given like one teacher can teach many course.
Sorry, see, one teacher can teach many courses, but
Hmm.
one course is going to be taught by one teacher or one offline teacher and one online teacher.
Okay.
So in this case, one teacher can teach on many courses, but one course is going to be taught by either one online teacher or offline teacher.
Okay.
So you have to remember. So from which end you are looking at the relationship? If you are looking at the teacher end, so one teacher can teach multiple online courses, multiple offline courses, no doubt about it. But if you are looking at this course end, suppose the Java is there in the course. Java course means that is going to be taught by either one online teacher or an offline teacher. But at the same time, one teacher can teach multiple online courses and multiple offline courses. Clear?
Sir, here we wantedly set in this way, right? But general thing, one course can teach by multiple online instructors and multiple offline teachers, right?
See, so that is also possible. But see, so what exactly in this case I'm trying to explain you, right? What is the use of a multiple relationship? Ideally, see, in real time, you might not get this kind of scenario. That the right where you have to establish right more than one relationship between two tables. But this is one ideal scenario. For example, right, let assume a small institution is there where where there are two people are providing training, and one people is for online teaching and another one is for offline teaching. Then in that scenario, you can implement this one,
Okay, sir.
right? See, when you are going to develop the application, you can decide whatever you want to decide, you want to do. And for example, if I want to implement one-to-one relationship, that one teacher means he can only teach one course. That is also possible. We are the developer. Whatever we want, we can do it, right? Clear or not? See, as a developer, if I represent here only one course, is there any issue? Is there any error? It is going to give me no. As a developer, whatever we want, we can do it. But this is just an example, right? If there is right, if there is a multiple relationship between right, two entities, then how you can manage that relationship? That is what you need to understand. Rather than thinking too much about the teacher and the courses, it is for you to understand, right? If there is such scenario comes in your project where there are two entities and they are having multiple relationships, then how you can effectively manage that relationship, that's what you need to understand. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Right. And
Sir, I can.
yes, yes. Anyone having any question? Someone asking something?
Sir, can you please summarize this? It's a bit confusing. I mean, kind of summarization.
So what summarization you need? So did you attend the from the beginning?
Yes, sir.
Yes, so you just tell me what is the use of inverse property?
It is to create a multiple foreign keys.
So it is not to create multiple foreign keys. Foreign keys are going to be created by the foreign key attribute or by default they are going to be created.
Sir,
So,
sir,
am I said that foreign key is going to be created by this inverse property? So whenever there is multiple relationship between the two same entities, right? By default, if there is one-to-one relationship, right? I mean, there is only one application properties pointing to each other. Then in that case, right, you can easily identify, right? This is the right principal entity navigation property, and that is the dependent entity navigation property. And based on this two navigation property, I want to generate the relationship. Now you just tell me. So in this case, this online teacher ID it is going to be created as a foreign key and the relationship, right? Okay, let me comment at these two. Let me comment at these two parts. Now you just tell me. So by looking at this, right, online teacher and this online courses, right? So the relationship is established based on this two navigation property or something else.
Yes, sir.
So what type of relationship is this?
One to many.
One teacher can teach many courses. So you can say one teacher can teach many online courses. So in this case, as there is only one-to-one relationship, or sorry, one-to-one relationship you are taking in a wrong manner. So we can say there is one-to-one navigation properties between the same two entities. So in the course entity, we are having one navigation property teacher. And in the teacher entity, we are having only one navigation property courses. So entity framework can automatically determine, right? So this is the navigation property, and this navigation property is related with this navigation property. And he can create the foreign key automatically because he determined the relationship between these two navigation property. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Now coming to this part, I have
One
enabled
question
this.
I have. Is
Yes.
this not going to contradict normalization?
So what normalization you are talking?
No, the table it will be created here for the teacher. Two teacher column will be basically created. Online teacher and offline teacher.
Yes. See, in this case, we are right using normalization here. Why I'm saying? So do I need to enter multiple entries? Because here the course ID is going to be same, course name is going to be same, course description is going to be same. The same course can be taught by one online teacher and one offline teacher. According to you, what is the best approach?
No, I am just asking.
But I'm asking you
I,
also, no? So you are asking means I'm also going to ask you the same
I will
question.
have to think what will be the best approach.
No. So you just tell me, so if the course ID is one, course name is one, course description is one, and this course can only be taught by either one online teacher and one offline teacher, then what is the best approach? If one course can be taught by multiple, right, what I can say teacher, then I can go with one to many. But in this case, I'm sure this course is going to be taught by one online teacher and one offline teacher. So according to you, what is the best approach?
Two entry
Two entry.
can
So
two row
two
for two row.
row, where I
One.
will enter two row.
No, I am taking telling you one scenario where can we enter two row in the table. One for
Which
the
table you are talking about? That what I'm asking. In the course table, or in the
yeah.
teacher table, or in any other table.
Ideally, in that case, in both table we have to enter. Ah,
So I should enter two rows in the course table.
Then course will going to repeat. It will repeat the course again.
So teacher is my principal entity, where I'm one teacher ID is one teacher ID is two. So one teacher is providing online course and one teacher is providing offline course. So if I'm going to enter two rows, that means the same course ID is going to be different or not?
yeah,
Course
yeah.
name is going to be
Got
different or not?
yeah, got it.
Right. So here I'm having only one course and I'm having two foreign keys. That is the reason why I'm marking this foreign key as optional. Why? Because if you want, you can put a null value. For example, one course is there which is going to only teach by online teacher. That is fine. So I can enter online teacher and the offline teacher is going to be null. So the same course can only be taught by one offline online teacher or offline teacher. At that time, you can also enter the other value is going to be null. The same course can be taught by both. So you can enter both the teacher ID column value here. So that is the best approach what I am following here. So according to the normalization, there should not be any code duplication, right? Yes, if one course is going to be taught by multiple teacher, then in that case I need to go with a many-to-many relationship. But here that scenario is not. Here the multiple many-to-many scenario is not there. Clear?
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Right? So now till now, there is no issue because here we are having one reference navigation property and here one collection navigation property, right? Forget about reference and collection. So consider here one navigation property and here one navigation property. So automatically when there is one navigation property between two entities, automatically the framework can determine, yes, this navigation property is related to that navigation property. This navigation property of a principal entity is related to that navigation property of the dependent entity. That framework can automatically determine, right? Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to introduce the offline teacher entity. So now once I introduce this thing, so now can you please tell me, right? So now can you please tell me this online teacher is now related to which right? So now this online teacher navigation property is now related to which collection navigation property of this teacher entity?
Online
Online.
courses.
So I'm not using this inverse property.
Then we cannot say.
So how you can determine that this online teacher is now related to this online courses or offline courses. Without inverse property, how you can determine?
Yes, sir, we
If
cannot.
We cannot.
see, if you cannot determine that this online course teacher is related to online courses or online teacher is related to offline courses, if you cannot determine, then how entity framework will determine? Getting my point?
Yes, sir.
Right. So what we need to tell? So we need to tell, right, that this right reference property or this navigation property is related to that navigation property of the other end, right? So you can apply this property in either navigation property, either in the principal entity or in the dependent entity. For example, here I apply the online right inverse property. So once I apply online teacher, online courses, and here I apply online teacher means now this online courses is related to online teacher of the other entity. So in other entity, there is an online teacher. Now we are explicitly telling this online courses is now related to online teacher. Similarly, I uncomment this one, right? So now we are explicitly telling that this offline courses is related to offline teacher. Now, and once we tell this thing to entity framework, so he can determine the relationship and accordingly he create the foreign key and establish the relationship. Clear?
Okay, here the online teacher can only access the online courses using this inverse property.
Sorry?
Here the online teacher can be only access to this online courses by using the inverse property.
Yes. Right. Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that is the reason why inverse property is there, right? Ideally, you will not see the use of this inverse property, right, drastically in your application. But yes, this concept is there. Good to know. Clear, guys?
Yes, yes.
So the point that what you need to remember, the inverse attribute can be applied to either side of the relationship. You can apply on the principal entity or in the dependent entity. It accepts a string parameter that specifies the name of the corresponding navigation property of the other entity. If you are applying in the principal entity, then you have to specify what is the other right related entity of the other related navigation property of the other entity. That what you need to specify. Always ensure property names provided in the inverse property are accurate. What exactly it means? So whatever property name I provided here, that should and must be same as this one. Otherwise, you will get runtime error. Clear? Clear or not?
Yes, sir.
Right. So this is right. Uh, Ideally, you will not use this inverse property very frequently, but good to know, right? So now what I'm going to discuss is, this is one of the very right useful attribute not. So can anybody tell me what is not mapped? Anybody having any idea?
That
No
a
tracking by
particular
entity
column that not has been created.
Okay. Not mapped means what?
That entity, that property should not create as a column in database.
Can I apply this to only property? Is it possible to apply to the entity?
Yes.
Yes.
Right? So this not a mapped attribute. It can be applied to entity, right? As well as to the properties of our entity, right? So basically, what exactly the use of this not mapped attribute? Now, if you don't want one entity to be created as a database table in the database, if you don't want an entity to be created as a database table in the database, then in that case, you need to mark this entity with the not mapped attribute. Similarly, if you are having one entity having many properties, and if you want some of the properties to be not created as a column in the database, then those properties you need to mark with this not mapped attribute. So basically, whenever you whenever you decorate a entity or a properties of an entity with a not mapped attribute, then that entity will not be created as a database table in the database, even if you specify that entity using dbset property. And again, right, those properties which are marked with not mapped attribute, they are not going to be created as right a database column. The question that should come to your mind is when to use. Before learning human to use, let us try to understand. So this attribute belongs to system.component model.data annotation.schema namespace. And second thing is that this attribute doesn't have any other property except a parameterless constructor. So it is not taking anything special, only taking one constructor which is going to be parameterless. So the point that what is right. So I'm going to discuss two examples. One applying this entity to the properties, and another example, right, where I'm going to okay, let's start with this properties example, then I'll show you, right, the entity example, right? So right, so what I'm going to do, I'm having one employee entity. Now in the employee entity, I'm going to store the ID, I'm going to store the first name, I'm going to store the last name, I'm going to store the date of birth, right? I'm going to store the date of birth, I'm going to store the date of joining, date of birth, and the date of joining. So these are the few columns that what I'm going to store right now. Now these are the columns, that's fine. Now what is our requirement? Now in the report, right, we want to display employee details. So what is the data what I want to display? Not only this information, but also I want to display, right? I don't want this first name, last name. I want a property called full name. Along with the date of birth, right? Yeah, along with the date of birth, I want to calculate the age. I want to display. And the date of joining means, right? What I can say, tenure. Tenure means how many years you are working for that company. So this information I want to display. So if I want to display this information, what I need to do? So these are the entity properties. So for example, I'm having one employee properties of an employee entity. So these are the properties of a employee entity. So ID, first name, last name, full name, date of birth, age, date of joining, and tenure. So now if all these are required while I'm going to display the data, that means what? Do I need to create all these things as part of my employee entity?
Yes, we can, but we should put not
Required,
mapped.
sir. Not required.
Right. So in this case, so if I'm putting this last name, full name, right, first name, last name, and again, if I'm creating this column in the database, does it make sense?
No.
No.
No, sir.
So I'm using date of birth. So does it make sense to create this age column?
No.
No.
No, sir.
Why no? If you are saying no, then you also need to justify why no.
Anyway,
Full
those info already exist in other columns. Then why
And
we
suppose
computed
and
columns. These we can easily compute. Full name with the
yes,
help of
They're
first name,
not so
last name.
first of all, see, computed columns are something different. Computed
but sir,
column means column in the database.
Right? No, not in the in the .NET side. I am trying to say.
but sir,
So these are
if suppose my age is 20 October 1984, then now I am checking in 2024.
Logic based.
Then age will be
Based
different,
on
and
logic.
after
the
2 years, age will be different. So there is
exactly,
no make sense to make the
exactly,
age
exactly,
in
exactly.
entire.
The point that what you need to remember, this date of birth column is going to store in the database. But on a daily basis, that age what I'm going to calculate on the fly, that value is going to be changed. So every time, so already I'm storing this one, then why should I store age? But this age I need. This age I need to display the age of the employee. This date of joining means what? When I join on a daily basis, the number of year, number of a month is going to be changed or it will be constant.
Will be changed, sir.
It will be changed. So if something which is going to be changed on a daily basis or something which is going to be calculated based on the odds of the database, then such columns we should not be created on the database. So in this case, I should not create a first name in the database. I should not create age on the database. I should not create a tenor on the database. Why? Because already first name, last name is there. No need to create full name. Full name I can calculate on the fly. Date of birth is already there. I can dynamically calculate the age of that employee. Date of joining is there. I can directly calculate the tenure of that employee. But if I'm putting all this field inside the employee entity, then when I do the migration, then automatically all these columns are going to be created in the database or not?
Yes, sir.
So if
Sir.
you don't want such columns to be created in the database, then what you need to do, you need to mark those properties with NotMapped attribute. So they will be as part of your employee entity. They are going to be calculated on the fly based on the existing value or some computation, but they are not going to be created in the database, right, as a column. Clear what is the use of NotMapped attribute? Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Perfect.
So we can say we can derive from a existing column so that
Okay,
we
so
can
this
use
is,
NotMapped.
yes. So this first name, last name is already there. So while I'm creating the employee, while I'm creating the employee data, I need to provide this full name property implementation in such a way that it should calculate the first name and the last name property values, combining. Date of birth is already there. So I need to provide the get accessor of this age column, which is going to calculate the age based on this date of birth. Similarly, this date of joining is already there. So while I'm fetching the data, I mean, while I'm defining the employee entity, I need to provide implementation for this tenor so that it is going to calculate the number of years you are working for that company based on the date of joining. That means whatever column I'm decorating with the not mapped attribute, those column implementation also I'm going to provide. How that column value is going to be calculated? Clear?
Using
So I have one question. So what is the
Yes.
difference between not mapped and ignore?
So ignore is basically something which you, whenever you are working with the web API, where you are returning the data to the client, right?
Okay.
So in the JSON serialization, right? For example, if you are having one JSON object and some of the properties which you don't want to expose to the client, at that time you need to decorate those properties with the ignore, JSON ignore, right? And
Ignore
this
it
is
like.
something related to your database, not related to the
Yes, yes,
client
understood.
application where you are returning the data. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Right, so we'll discuss, right? So whatever you are talking about, ignore, JSON, ignore, all these things we will discuss in our ASP.NET Core Web API, right? So now let us understand this example practically, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one employee entity, right? So go to the entities folder, create one class file, employee.cs file. Okay, employee entity is already there. Yes. So this is my employee entity already there. So let me go ahead and implement this one. So here you can see this is my employee ID, first name, last name, date of joining, date of birth. This is going to my department ID, and based on and this is going to my department, which department he belongs to. This is the tenor property which you can see I decorated with NotMapped, and here you can see I'm having the only get accessor, and whatever the current day, right today year and whatever the date of joining year, accordingly, we are calculating the years, right? How many number of years he is working for that company. Similarly, this is my age column. What is the today, right year? What is his date of birth year? And accordingly, we are calculating his date of, right? Accordingly, we are calculating here age. So this age property going to return the age of the employee, and this tenure property going to return the number of years he is working for that company. And this is the full name property. Here you can see it is very simple, right? Just directly I'm returning first name and last name property values. That's it. So these are the three properties you can see which I marked with the not mapped attribute. Not mapped attribute means what? This is not going to be created as part of the database table columns. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Right. Next,
Okay,
what
sir.
I need to do is I need to create the department entity. Okay, let me go ahead and create the department entity. So this is going to my department entity, department ID, name, and a collection of employees, right? Department ID name and each department having collection of employees. Right. Next, what I need to do is I need to modify the DB context class here. Right. For the testing purpose, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create right few employees. So you can see this is my database employees DB. Okay, let me first delete the employees DB database. Okay, right now. Now what I'm doing here, this is the things that what I no need to explain, that we are using SQL Server database provider and providing the connection string of a SQL Server database, right? So here you can see I'm inserting two data, right? And one more thing here, guys, needs to remember, using this hard data method within the on model creating, we can provide some CD data. So for this department entity, whatever data I want to insert, I can insert using this Harsh data method. And guys, remember when you are using this Harsh data method to provide some dummy data, at that time, that identity will not work. For the identity column value also, you need to provide the value. So here in the database, this department table is going to be created where department ID is going to be the primary key as well as identity. But before creating, but while I'm creating the database, at that time also I'm going to insert some data. So if I'm inserting the data using this entity framework or hash data method, I have to provide the explicit value for the primary column as well. Or you can say identity column as well. So here I'm inserting two dummy department, and here I'm inserting a few employee data. So you can see employee ID, first name, last name, date of joining, date of birth, and here department ID. Similarly, employee ID 2, employee ID 3, and employee ID 4. And here I'm creating department and employees as DB set properties. Means it is going to create two tables. One is department and another one is employees. Clear, guys?
Okay,
Clear
sir.
or not? So basically here we are providing some dummy data using the seed method, right? Hash data method. So this is the database seeding, you can say. Some dummy data, if you want to provide while creating the database, you can make use of model builder entity, whatever the department, hash data method. And for to do this, you need to override this on model creating method. Within this method, any entity, department entity, employee entity, same hash data method, and you need to create a new employee, new, right? As many number of employee you want, you can create, and they are going to be created as part of the database, right? Table. But the important thing, explicitly you need to provide the identity column value. Clear, guys?
Sir, it will create only one time or whenever we run the migration
One
file.
time. So only one time it is going to create.
Okay, if not, we'll get duplicate data. Okay.
Right, right. Yeah. So for that purpose, right? So that duplication and all these things, right? You need to handle, right? How you can handle? You need to check if the employee table is not empty, then create this. All these things are there, right? Which we will discuss in our coming section. You can write some logic, right, where you need to check if the employee table doesn't empty or right, or it doesn't any data, then insert the dummy data. If you're already having some data, then don't insert the data. So those logic also it is possible, which we will also discuss, right, in our coming session. Now, all right, we are not focusing on the employee shading and all these things. Our main focus is on the right not mapped and all those things. So this is just for demo purpose, right? So now what I'm going to do is, right, so let me create another migration file. Let's give this 6. Then update the database. Right. So now employees DB, go ahead and check. So this is my employees DB. So here you can see the department table. It should have 2 department. And here you can see the employee table where it is having 4 employees, right? So now what I need to do is I need to generate a report, right, where I need to display the employee and the corresponding right department and the corresponding employees, right? So for this purpose, what I need to do is I need to modify the program class, right? So here you can see it's very simple. I'm creating the context object. I'm fetching the department's entity. So including, right? So guys, remember, can anybody tell me what do you mean by include method? If I'm using this include method, what type of loading is implementing here? Lazy
Eager
loading,
loading.
eager
Joining.
Eager loading.
Including.
loading means what type of statement it is going to do? It is going to generate SQL joining statement, right? So what I'm doing here, I'm fetching all the departments, and while fetching the departments, the corresponding employees are also going to be loaded using a single query using SQL join. So here what I'm doing, I'm looping through all the department, whatever the department name I'm displaying, and then I'm looping through all the employees of a particular department, and then I'm looping through all the employees. So I'm displaying the employee name, and here I'm displaying employee tenure and what is his date of joining, employee age, and what is his date of birth. And here date of birth I'm going to display in this format, right? So that's what I have written here. Now, if you run the application, right, here you can see I'm not displaying the first name and last name. If you want, you can access, no issue. Rather than I'm using full name property, which is going to display the first name and the last name. Tenor, that is going to be calculated on the fly based on the date of joining, is calculated on the fly based on the date of birth. Clear? And how this is full name, tenor, and age values are going to be calculated, that we have already defined using the get accessor. Clear or not?
Okay, sir.
Yes or no? Any difficulty, any question, guys? Let me run the application and see whether we are getting the data as expected or not. Am I getting the data? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Clear or not? How and when to use the not mapped attribute, is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right? Right? That is what you need to do. Now, so in this example, right, in this example, if I remove this not mapped attribute, is it going to work?
No, sir.
Why no?
It is using some
It will
data which is
it will
exist in the database.
So in this case, okay, let me delete this migration folder altogether. Let me delete this employee database altogether. Now, if I
To form a
generate the
table. The data.
file,
it will create multiple
in this case, what will happen? Do you think that this tenor, age, right, and this full name, they are going to be created as part of the database table or not?
yes, yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, you are
Smart.
absolutely wrong. Do we have the set accessor of these properties?
No, sir.
If
Oh,
you do
yeah,
not
yeah,
have
yeah.
set
Yeah.
accessor, then
Yes.
can you, while
Yes.
I am creating one entity, can I set the value of this
No,
tenor,
no, no.
age, name?
No.
No, sir. No.
So the point that what you need to remember, whenever you are defining one property without set accessor means that property, for that property, entity framework is not going to create any column.
So
So
actually
now
by
if you
default it's
look
not
at this, get set, all these properties are having getter and setter accessor. But these three properties, tenor, age, and this right full name, does it have the set accessor? No. So if there is no set accessor means they are not going to be created as, right, what I can say, database column. Right? So let us
Why then do
also,
you use NotMapped, sir?
sorry?
Why then did
Then
you use
why not
NotMapped?
mapped
There's no
came into
need.
the picture, sir?
Yeah,
For
there's no
example,
need.
if you are having the set accessor, then what you will do?
Okay, if you have, but if you don't have, there's
If
no
I'm
need for
having both the
NotMapped.
same, so if this property having both get and set accessor, then it is going to be created as a column in the database. If you mark this as a not mapped attribute, then it will not be created as a column. So not mapped attribute means it is explicitly telling to the framework, hey, please don't think about this property. Don't check the get and set accessor. I'm just telling you, just ignore this while you are creating the database. But if not mapped attribute is not there, then it is going to check, does this property has both get and set accessor? Yes, then create the column. No, only set get accessor. Don't create the column. Clear or not?
Okay, sir.
Right now, let me again generate the migration file. I have deleted all migration file. Let me start from the fresh. Update the database. And now if you verify, then now it should create the database, but without those columns because they don't have the set accessor. Clear? So this is another approach, but the preferred approach is using the not mapped attribute because that is explicitly you are telling that this property is going to be right. The property is going to be ignored while generating the database. Why? Because accidentally, if you put the set accessor, then even though you develop this code, tomorrow someone come and he put the set accessor. Again, right, when generating the migration means that property, right, is going to be created as a column in the data. But if you mark that property with the not mapped attribute, means doesn't matter whether you are putting the right get accessor, set accessor, doesn't matter. That is not going to be created as a database column. Clear, guys?
Yep.
Right. Now, so we have discussed this thing. Now what we need to do is we need to understand, right, how to apply or when to apply this not mapped attribute with the entity class. So we have discussed how to apply this property to a, right, what I can say, properties of an entity. But it is also possible that we can apply this attribute to the entity class itself. Let us understand this with one real-time scenario, right? Suppose we want to write what I can say, we want to generate one report, right? For generating the report, right, we have created one database table called expenses, and this table contains some expense ID, department, purpose, amount, and date. For example, now whatever amount we spend for each department, that information we are storing inside this table. And at some point of time, what is our requirement? Our requirement to create a report where we need to display what is the total amount spent, right, on each department and how many number of transactions are there. So for that purpose, right, what I need to do, I need to create this entity. So department name and what is the total expenses for a specific period of time and how many number of transactions are there. As we have already stored this information in the database, like expense ID, department, what is the purpose of the expense and what is the amount and the date. Do I need to create another table for this? Or based on this
No,
data,
sir. No, sir.
we can right, based on this data, we can get this information, right, and we can return this information, right, to whoever wants. So in situations like this, I need to create the expense as a database table, but not this department expense report as a database table. If you don't want to create this as a department right, as a database table, you need to mark this entity with not mapped attribute. So once you mark this entity as not mapped attribute, then even if you accidentally put this as a DB set property in the entity class, then also it is not going to be created as a database table, right? Let us understand this right practically. So this is my expense entity, right? So this is my entity class. Let me create this class. So expense.cs. So this class I want to create as a database table, right? So I have not applied that, right? What I can say, not mapped attribute. So this class is basically used to generate the report, right? So let me go ahead and add the class file. So this class is going to create the report. So let me go ahead and create this one. And here you can see I have applied the not mapped attribute. So this is not going to be created as a DB set property, right? Next, what I'm going to do is, right, I'm going to override, right, I'm going to provide some, right, dummy data for the testing purpose. So database is going to be expense DB. Let me first delete the expense DB, which must be there because I have also before the session, I also test the functionality, do some research. So this is the seed data, right? For testing purpose, you can say expense entity, expense ID, department, purpose, office supply, software license, team launch, training, hardware upgrade, right? Whatever purpose, and the amount what we spend for each right expense, and then at what date this is done, right? So this information we have provided, right? So and here you can see this is my expense deficit property. And accidentally, see, if I'm not providing this department expense report as a deficit property, it is not going to create a table. But but if I put this department expense report accidentally in the DB context class, but here, if you look at this report, it is decorated with not mapped attribute, means this is going to be respected by entity framework core. So entity framework core respect this not mapped attribute, and while generating the database and the migration, right, at that time, he is not going to create a database table which is going to be mapped with this entity, right? So with these changes, let me do one more thing. Let me delete this file and generate the migration file one more time. Okay, so before generating, we need to remove this main method code because right currently we are not using department and all this thing. Okay, so let me go to the package manager console, clear this one, migration generate. Okay, so no store was specified for the decimal property amount on entity expense. Okay, let us also remove this warning. So I also generally not prefer any kind of a warning. So what I need to do, guys, tell me what attribute I need to apply.
NotMapped.
Column.
Column attribute. Column attribute. And here I need to specify the data type as decimal. So what should be the size? Let's put it as
18
6,
foods.
6, 2. So total, okay, 8, 2, maximum 8 character, sorry, maximum 8 digit, and after the decimal, 2, right? So because I don't think, right, there is some expense like more than, okay, if you want to put more, okay, then put 10. By default, it is 18, 2, right? So let me do this, and then again generate the migration file. So I give the migration file as mig2. Again, amount on type expense. So where I have applied this. Okay, so what mistake I have done? I have not specified the type name. Clear? So that is what I need to specify. Okay, let me generate one more time. This time I should not get any warning. Okay, some scaffolded operation, that is fine, right? So now what I'm going to do, update hyphen database. Right now, if you verify, then you should see the expense DB, and inside the expense DB, you should see only one table. Clear? Right. That's one more thing, guys, I need to explain you, right? So I'm deleting this one. I'm deleting this one. Expense DB, I'm deleting. And then I'm just deleting this migration. So without generating migration, it is also possible to create the database, right? So let's see how we can do this. So we are working with this migration for a long time. There is also another option, that is the database dot ensure created method. So on the context object, right, while I'm creating the context object, I'm calling this ensure created. So this will make sure the database is created or not. If database is not created, then it is going to create the database with the required table, with the required data, what we specified here, right? So this is going to be happening, right? If the database is not created, if the database is created, then it is not going to do anything. So if you are creating for the first time without migration also, it is possible to check these things, right? So now, right, it is going to create the database, it is going to insert the dummy data, right? And that is the thing it is going to do, right? So once this is done, right, then what I'm doing, I'm creating one generate department expense report, and then I'm displaying the expense summary. So while I'm generating the department expense report, so what I'm doing, I'm fetching all the data from the expense table. So this is going to my expense table. So you can see this is my expense table. And here I'm grouping the data by department. So here based on the HR, there are two records. For IT, there are going to be 3 records. So I'm grouping the data, and then I'm selecting or projecting the data into a new entity, and that entity in this case, this department expense report, right? So that is what I'm projecting the data to this department expense report. Whatever the department name is, nothing but the group dot key total expense, whatever. So group operation means it is, you can use this group by clause, group dot sum amount. So whatever the all amount of a particular group, that amount it is going to sum, and then the number of a transaction is nothing but a group dot count and the to list. So this is what it is returning from this method. That is the list of total department expense report, and then that total department expense report summary I'm passing to this method. So this method is simply, right, going to loop through all the data and display it on the console. Right? What is the department name? total expenses and number of transactions, right? So now run the application, and this time it should create the database, and then it is going to display the data. Clear? Now, if you verify, then it should have created the expense table. And but this time, right, you will not see that migration history table. Why? Because this database is not created based on the migration. Clear, guys?
Sir, can you explain the dot key property? I didn't get that. Yeah, group
So
dot
I'm not
key.
sure. This dot key means you know how to use a group by clause in a link queue.
This is the link you syntax. Okay, sir. I will check. C# videos.
Right? I have already given this right
Mhm.
link videos. Just go and check. So how to use the
Okay.
group by, how to project the data. Right? If I'm not providing this department expense report, is it possible? So how? If it is possible, then in that case you can remove, right? But in that case it will not work. Why? I'm returning this one, right? So if you want to create so anonymous object, right? Everything is possible. So you just go ahead and check this thing. Clear, guys? So what is the use of this not mapped attribute? Is that clear? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you can apply the not mapped attribute to a property, as well as you can also apply to the entity class itself. Next, what we are going to discuss, one of the important attribute, that is required attribute. And I hope you guys are very aware about this required attribute. Can anybody tell me what is a required attribute?
It is a mandatory.
Mandatory one.
What do you mean by mandatory?
Can be null.
Hmm?
If we are setting any property as required and we are sending that in API, that means we have to provide the value. It
So
cannot
am I
be.
am I using any API here?
Even here, required means like not null column or not null entity. Okay.
Right. So the required attribute, right? It is used for two purposes, right? The required attribute, it is used for two purposes. From the entity framework core point of view, right? It will mark the column as not null. Clear? It will mark the column as not null. So it will mark the column as not null. And from the validation point of view, model validation, right? If you are working with the MVC and Web API application, right? So it will going to validate the column, right? The property should not be empty. Property should not be right, null or empty. Clear? Clear or no? See, if from the entity framework point of view means while creating the database column, so it will create the column as not null. But from the validation point of view, for example, if you are getting the data from the client, right? The client is sending some information. So when the client is sending the data, then if that property you marked with the required attribute means he cannot send any null or empty. He has to provide a value. That is the use of validation. And from entity framework core point of view, right, it is going to mark the property as a not. Clear? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Let us try to understand this thing, right? So if you look at the signature of this required attribute, then it is having the signature. Uh, Required attribute, you can see, doesn't take any constructor parameter. Right, and here you can see allow empty string, that is a boolean parameter. This allow empty string is not linked with a entity framework core, or you can say database schema, and it is related to, right, what I can say, it is related to validation, model validation in the sense, if you want to allow empty string as a valid value, then you have to set this value to true. By default it is false. Means what? Means by default empty string are not allowed by the required attribute, right? For example, if you use the required attribute with a model property, and if you pass any null value or empty value, it is going to give you some validation error. But if you set this value to false, then at that time null, it is going to give you the error, But for empty string, it will consider that a valid value. Clear or not?
Yes, sir.
Right? So this is not related to database schema. I'm talking. This is related to your model validation. And don't what I can say. Don't mix both things. So entity framework or database is something different, and model validation is something different, right? And it is also possible that without using entity framework, or we can also create some DTO. We can create some model where we can apply this required attribute. At that time, it is going to behave like a validation attribute. And if I'm using this required attribute on any entity, then at that time it is going to create that property as a what I can say not null constant. And validation, if you are using some kind of MVC and WebAPI application, and if you are using that entity as a model object, right, at that time validation also will come into the picture. So let us understand this with one example, right? So let me first explain the default behavior, and then I will show you how you can overcome the default behavior. So let me go to the student entity. This is my student entity. So in the student entity, guys, remember, so those properties which are marked with the question mark, they are going to be created as a sorry, they are going to be created as a null column. If the property is a non-nullable type, this is going to be not null. So by default, you can see student and roll number. I have not applied the question mark. Means what? Means it is going to be not null column. It is going to be not null column. So here string, I have applied the question mark. Means it is going to be a null column. It is going to be a null column. For example, let me remove this one and put the question mark here. So in this case, sorry, not here. I need to put the question mark after the data type. So in this case, student ID, it is going to be not null. Name, it is going to be null. Address, it is going to be not null. Roll number, it is going to be null. Why? Because in this case, this is a non-nullable. Why? Because we have not applied the question mark after the data type. But here, after the data type, we have put the question mark. Means what? Means it is a null column. Here, address, you can see, I have not provided the question mark. Means what? It is going to be a nullable type. Sorry, it is going to be not null column. But here, I have applied the question mark. So what exactly it means? It is going to be by default a null column. So the point that what you need to remember is if the column, if the entity property, if the property is a nullable type property, then it is going to create a null column in the database. If the property is a non-nullable type, means the property is not decorated, the data type is not decorated with the question mark, then in that case, it is going to create a not null column in the database. Clear or not?
Yes, sir.
Right. So now if I remove this question mark here, and if I remove this question mark here, then in this case, which column is going to be not null? Student is going to be not null. Roll number is going to be not. Name, it is going to be null, and address, it is going to be null. So let me do some differences. So here, what I'm doing, I'm marking something like this. So I always do the mistake. Okay, right. So now in this case, this is going to be not null. This is not null. This is null, and this is null. Right. So let us prove this thing. So next, what I'm going to do, I need to modify the what I can say the context objects. Next, I need to delete the code from the main method because it is going to give you error because we have removed the respective DB context properties from the DB context class. So with these changes, now generate the database and check the default behavior. So let me open this one, package manager console, clear the screen, generate the migration, give the 4. So what is the database we specified here? EF core DB, right? So this is my EF core DB. Let me refresh this one. So in this table, it should have created the students table. And here you can see student ID not null, name null, address not null, roll number null. Roll number null, why? Even though roll number is a primitive type data type, right? You can see we have marked this question mark. Question mark means what type of a column is going to be it is going to be null. And here you can say address. I have not provided the question mark. So what is the data type? Not null. And the name is null. Why? Because name is marked with the question mark. Clear, guys? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, see, the default is working fine, right? No need to use the required attribute. It in the right what I can say model validation. But if you want, right, then also you can use it. The default functionality is more than sufficient. And this required attribute, right? Ideally, it's not required, right? What exactly it means? Ideally, it is not required while you are creating the database schema. This is more right useful, right, in model validation. If you are working with the MVC and Web API project, at that time this attribute is going to be used frequently, right, for validating the data. But yes, if this property I have applied the question mark, here also I have applied the question mark, means it is a nullable type property. It is also a nullable type property. Even though these are nullable type property, once I mark the required attribute, this is going to be respected by the framework. So now, even though this is a nullable type property, as we mark this property with the required attribute, means this is going to be created as a not null column. And the same in the case of a roll number, right? So let me go ahead and write what I can do.
Then why two concepts are coming into the picture?
I will explain now, right? So two concept why it is coming, right? So let's see. Now you can see the student column, all the column are going to be not null. Why? Clear? So why means what? So what I am telling, let's say this required data annotation attribute, its major role is not related to database schema. What is its major role? Major role is model validation. Do you have any knowledge related to MVC and Web API project?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So in that project, are you using this required attribute to validate the model properties?
Yes, sir.
So the main use of this required attribute is going to be in that case only. But yes, this is also available in entity framework core. If you want to mark a property as a required attribute explicitly, you can mark this one. Otherwise, right, this is not required. Why? Because by default, if it is not nullable, then it is going to be created as a not null column. If it is nullable, it is going to be created as a null column. But if we mark this required attribute, then right, doesn't matter whether the property is a nullable type or non-nullable type, that column is going to be created as a database column. Clear? Yes, sir.
Would required override the query mark.
Yes.
Okay.
So this is
Okay.
going to be take the priority over this, right, data type. So now data type doesn't matter. What is matter? This required attribute. So it is going to create this column as a required column. Clear?
So
Now, so
Yeah.
now, right, so we have already discussed if you want to mark a column as not null, we have two options. One, you can remove the question mark. Other option, you can apply the required attribute. Clear? Yes or no?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Now let us try to understand some example, right? So we have created all the properties are right. What I can say, required properties. Now, so here you can see I'm creating a student object. I'm specifying the address, roll number, but I have not specified the name. So as I'm not specifying the name property, and for the name property, I'm creating a not null column. So do you think that while I'm adding the context object and calling the step changes method, it is going to add that student?
no.
So it
No.
should throw some database exception. And guys, remember, whenever you are working with the entity framework core, and whenever you are getting some exception, right, while executing the query by the right context object, it is going to throw DB update exception. It is going to throw DB update exception, that what you need to use in the catch block. And this DB update exception, right, if you want to see what exactly the error message, then you need to check the message property of the inner exception property. So inside this DB exception object, there is a inner exception object, and through this inner exception object, you need to access the message property. This message property of the inner exception object is going to give you the actual exception information. So let us understand this at this time. So let me run the application. Right, so you can see the catch block is executed. Now, if you see null, okay, press F10. Right now, if you check this one, so inside this, right, so you should see there is some db, or right, there is some inner exception. So this is my inner exception, and if you want to see what exactly the error message, right, so you can see cannot insert value null into column name table student. Column doesn't allow null insert else. Clear? So how you will get the information in exception information? By using the inner exception object and the message property. So now you can see it is different. Cannot insert the value null into column name table if code student doesn't allow insert. Clear, guys? Right. Now, right, what will happen if we pass the empty string, right? So let me pass a empty string and see whether it is going to be accepted by the framework. So what I'm doing, so this name, what I'm doing here, passing the string in dot empty. So in this case, is it going to accept or not?
Accepted, sir.
It is going to be accepted. Why? Because the required attribute, so whatever not null column we created in the database, it is going to check the column value should not be, right, what null. So in that case, empty is going to be considered as a valid value.
Value, yes.
In this case, if we run this application at this point of time, then it should have shown that student added successfully. Now, if you verify the table, then you should see the table data. What happened? Right, so you can see name is empty, the student is being created, right? So now you might be wondering, sir, can I use that required attribute to allow empty string false? So there is a property available now, allow empty string, right? Allow empty string. Suppose I make this value to false, means what? I'm not going to allow empty string. So with these changes also, right? Let me generate the migration file. So anytime you do some changes, right, to the right, what I can say model classes or entity classes, you need to generate a migration file, right? So before proceeding further, let me clarify one thing. So once I generate the migration file, is there any changes?
No.
No. So what exactly it means? It means if I'm applying this required right allow empty string false, then it doesn't have any impact on the database schema. It doesn't have any impact on the database schema. It is only going to be useful whenever you are going to validate the data, right? In the right, if you are working with the MVC application or web API application, at that time it is going to be useful, but not when you are storing the data in the database. Even though we set this value to false, if we run the application again with the same set of data, again it is going to create a new entity, right? Why? Because it is not going to check that allow empty string, right? So now if you again execute, you are going to get this thing. So this is only coming into the picture when you are validating the data. Clear, guys? Yes or no?
That's when you are validating the model. That is when it comes into the picture.
Yes. So you might be wondering, right, model state dot is valid, right?
Yeah.
Those who are having some experience, I'm going to discuss this concept in depth, right? So at that time, I will explain, right? How the
Okay.
model binding is taking place, how the data coming from different sources, how it is going to be stored into the right respective model properties, right? What is the mechanism behind the scene? All these things we are going to discuss.
Okay.
Is that clear, guys?
Yeah.
The last thing what we are going to discuss in today's session is the max length and the min length attribute. So basically, right, guys, remember, like this required attribute, this max length and the min length attribute is there. Max length. So this max length attribute, right, it will set the size. It will set the column size, right? So it will set the column size. And validation also, right? A property should not be extend, right? Property should not contain more than the specified character. Right? So guys, remember, so what exactly it means, this max length attribute, what we are going to use, it will impact the database schema. It will set, suppose I'm specifying maximum length 50, then it will set the database column size as 50. Again, validation is also possible, right? Validation possible means, what I can say, and validation means what? If you are providing some data, then whatever the length you say specified, you cannot pass more than that size for that property value. Similarly, this is right. Similarly, min length attribute is there. Similarly, min length attribute is there. In case of min length attribute, entity framework code will set the column size as. So here maximum length, if I specify maximum length something like 50, right? Suppose I specify maximum length as 50, then it will set the column size as 50. And the property should not contain more than 50 characters. That is what the validation, and that is what the impact on database. So in case of a min length, it will not set the column size. Then what is the default size that will come into the picture? That is, it will not set the column size as min length. So in this case, it will set the column size as max, marker max, right? So clear? Because right, in database, we don't have that functionality where you can specify the minimum character you can accept for this column is this. That is not possible. So right, so if I'm using minimum length, then it will set the column size as default size, right? As default size, and we know the default size is max. But the validation is going to be accepted, right? Property, right? This validation will work, right? Property should not contain less than, right? Suppose I specify, it means the property should not contain, right? Minimum. The property should contain more than 5 characters, right? If it is having less than 5 characters, it is going to give some error. Clear? Clear or not?
Yep.
Right? So first of all, if I'm setting max length attribute, it will say whatever the size we specify, that will be the size of the database column. And also validation is going to be there. If I'm using min length, so it will not set that column size as whatever we specify, rather than what is the default size that will be going to be set as the column size, that is max. Validation in both scenario, validation will work, right? So let us understand this with some example, right? So first of all, I will show you the default data type size. So what entity I'm using here? Student entity. Okay. Let me go to the student entity. So this is my student entity. You can see student ID, first name, last name, and the. So this is integer. There is no size. Size will come into data on string and array type of property. So in this case, what should be the data type? Guys, tell me.
Embarker.
Marker max.
Marker of max. And in this case,
Same.
this is also going to be marker of max. And in this case, it is going to be var binary of max. So this is the default data type size. And this is integer, there is no size. Size will come into picture whenever we are using array or string. So for array, it is going to be marker of max, and for string, byte array. So for string, it is marker of max, and for byte array, it is going to be var binary of max. So let us show whether this is what it is happening or not. So let me first clear the screen. Build fail. Why build fail? Because we are using the program class. Some of the properties we are accessing which are no longer available. Let me remove this code. Right. So with these changes, let me again generate the what I can say migration file. Give different name. Update the data. Okay. Now check the table. Students entity. Students table. See var inverter of max var binary of max. Right, and for integer the data type is integer, there is no size limitations, right? Size only come into the picture whenever we are having varchar or var binary. Clear, guys? So the point that what I need to make you understand here is the default database column size is maximum. If it is primary key, the size is going to be 450 if it is a string data type. Clear? Clear, guys? What is
I
the
didn't hear you.
default?
What did you say? If it is string, what did you say the maximum is?
If the primary key is string, then the default column size is going to be n marker of 400. Okay, let us
Okay.
let us also prove this thing. Okay, let me delete this altogether. Delete this migration folder altogether. Right, and then what I'm going to do, right, go to this one. Instead of integer, put this as a string property. Right, so generate the migration one more time. Give the name as 1. Update the database. Okay, and then again refresh the database. EF code DB table, and this is going to be column. See, for primary key, it is going to be n marker of 450. For other column, this is going to be n marker of max and var binary of max. Clear?
Yes.
Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to set the maximum length and the minimum length, right? So let me go ahead and update the student entity. So this is my student entity. Let me go ahead and update. Here you can see I have specified the first name column length as a max length 50. Last name it is a 5 character. So in this case, what should be the column size? Guys, tell me. It is going to be
Bearcar max
Worker of
not a marker. It is
50.
going to be
and
n
bearcar.
marker.
Worker.
N marker,
Marker of
right? N marker of max, right or wrong?
Right, sir.
Right?
Wrong.
How you are saying right? What is the
Wrong.
size I have
yeah,
specified in
50.
the
50.
Oh,
Maximum
sorry.
50.
so means it is going to be 50. And here it is going to be n marker of a 5, right?
Max here.
5.
5 or max? What is the right
Max.
one?
5.
Max.
Then 5.
Because
Ma-
How
here
many
is
of you
minimum
are
length.
saying? So
Oh,
how many
minimum.
of
Yeah,
you,
okay. Okay.
The
Max.
min you
right?
told me default behavior, so it's a max.
So how
Yeah.
many of you are saying 5?
Nobody.
Nobody means everybody understand the concept, right? So in this case, the default value will come into the picture, that is n marker of a max. So let us prove these things.
Sir,
So
then what is the use of setting min length?
what is the use of min? So what is the use of min means
No,
this is
what
the
is the means of setting min length? Because it's taking default
that is
behavior.
what I'm saying. So
Which
what I'm
minimum
saying,
number
not
you
allowing
want 5?
the
so what I'm saying,
port side.
having two purpose. One is entity framework while generating the database schema. Another use is validation. So in entity framework while generating the schema, it does not have any impact. But where it has impact? While you are doing the validation. If you are providing some character and which is more than 5 character, it is going to give some error. So at the time of validation, but it is not, it doesn't have any impact on the database. Clear?
Got it. Yeah.
I will show you. I will show you this one example, right? I'm going to show you one example where it is going to validate the data, right? I know without validation and all these things, you will not get clarity. So I'm also going to show you this thing, right? So let me give this was MIG2 and update the database. Yeah, so to change the identity property. Am I changing the identity property? Yes. Earlier it was a string and now we are trying to create this as an integer, right? So what I can do is I have the option, I am the developer. So I can simply go and delete the database. So whatever I want, I can do it, right? Nobody can stop us as we are the developer. So let me generate the migration file and this time we should not get any error, right? Now, if you verify the database, then you should see that the EF core DB table with the required size. So first name 50 character, last name it is going to be n marker of a max. Clear?
Yes, sir.
Is that clear, guys? Everybody clear?
Yeah.
Okay. Now what I'm going to do is see this model validation and all these things, right? You will be going to use very frequently in MVC and the web API. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide some manual mechanism, right? So manual mechanism. So what I'm doing, I'm developing one application where I'm asking the right user to enter the information. First of all, I'm asking please enter the first name maximum 50 characters. Second, I'm asking please enter the minimum last name, which is going to minimum 5 characters. So whatever data I'm taking, that is first name and last name. Then what I'm doing, I'm creating one student object and I'm specifying the same value in the first and the last name. So once I have provided the first name and last name value, what I'm doing, I'm calling this validate student method, passing the student object. If validation successful, right, it is going to work as expected. If there is some validation error, then that the method is going to throw some validation exception. That exception is going to be handled by this validation error object and it is going to display the error message. Any exception which is going to be happening while executing this, calling this changes method, that is going to be captured by this MDP object. Any other exception that is going to be handled by this exception object, right? And then once we have the operation is completed, for testing purpose, I am fetching all the student data and I am displaying the student ID, name, first name and last name. So here what is important? Important is understanding this validate context method, which is going to do the validation manually. So first of all, I need to create the validation context object. So to this validation context object, I need to pass the student object, which is going to be, in this case, the student entity, which I received as a parameter. The second and the third parameter, we don't want to pass anything here because this is for the dependency, right, injection and the services. And this services dependency injection is not required, right, in our console application. This property will come into the picture, right, when we are going to work with the MVC and the web API. For now, you can simply pass the value as none, right? And then whenever there is some validation error, right? So what I can show, right? I'm creating a list to hold the result of the validation, right? So validation result, I'm going to store whether the validation successful error, whatever happened, that result I'm going to store inside a validation result instance. So you can see this is a collection of a valid collection variable where I'm going to check all the properties and then if all the properties are valid, that's fine. Otherwise, I'm going to show some kind of an error, right? So once I have this validation context and once I have this validation result where it is going to store the validation error message, then what I'm doing here, I'm calling the try validate object method of this validator class. And to this try validator object method, what I'm doing, I'm passing my student object, I'm passing my validation context, and this validation context, right, it is going to check, is there any data annotation attribute is applied to the student entity like first name, last name, right? Like maximum length, minimum length, required, any attribute is applied, right? And if applied, those attributes are going to be checked here. So this try validate method is going to check the student model, whatever property we pass, And also this validation context, it is going to tell any, right, whatever data annotation attributes are applied for the validation purpose, all these properties, right, all these attributes are going to be checked. Maximum length, minimum length, that is going to be checked. And if any validation error are there, that error message is going to be checked, stored inside this validation result. And the last parameter true means we need to check all the properties. That's what it is saying. Right? So all the properties are going to be checked. If you pass false, so if any validation error false, at that time it will stop and then it will not continue. If it true means all the properties are going to be checked, right? So here what I'm doing then, right? And this method is going to return me, right? What I can say, true if right the validation is successful, false if validation is failed. If validation is failed, I'm using this not operator so that I can execute this block when there is a validation fail. And once the validation fails, whatever the validation result, first object and what is the corresponding error message, that is what I'm throwing here. If there is no validation error, this static method is not going to throw anything and our application will work as expected, right? So now let us see both the scenario. First of all, I'm entering some valid data. I'm entering some valid data. First name, 50 characters. So I'm entering front end. Last name, maximum, right, minimum, how many number of characters? Minimum 5 characters. So what I'm providing here, MOHANTY. So it is satisfying. So now press the enter button. So student information has been saved successfully, and now we can see this is the student which is being added. So this is working fine. Now what I need to do, I need to check the right other scenario. Other scenario means first name, providing here Rana. Last name minimum 5 character. I'm providing Ram. How many characters are there? 4 characters. Is the validation successful? No. Press the enter button. What error message I'm getting? Validation error. The field last name must be a string or array type with a minimum length of a 5. And now, once I fetch the database, you can see only the student which is added previously, that is displayed here. Here, see, this last name doesn't have any issue with the database schema. If I'm passing 4 characters to the database, it will accept. But this last name, what I apply to this student entity, right, this minimum length, it is going to check the data, whatever the data, the entity containing, whether the data is valid as per the rules and regulation, what we applied. If it is valid, that is fine. If it is not valid, then I will give some error, something like this. Clear or not?
Clear.
Right? So it is also possible to set both the right, what I can say, minimum length and maximum length for a single property. For example, this is my property. So what is my requirement? First name, minimum 5 character, maximum 10 character. That is also possible. Clear, guys?
Yep.
Right? And again, guys, this is not only related to this thing. Even, right, whenever you are working with a MVC application, this data annotation can also enable client-side validation. So not only the server-side validation, client-side validation is also there. So data validation is there. Database schema configuration. Max length is going to specify the database schema, not the min length. And also they are going to enable client-side validation in ASP.NET Core applications, right? Clear? Anyone having any question, guys? They can ask me. So whatever right data annotation attributes remaining, database generated, timestamp and concurrency. This timestamp and concurrency are very important along with the database generation. So these three we are going to complete tomorrow, and then we will start Fluent API configurations. So data annotation, one more class we will complete, and then we will start Fluent API configurations. Okay, clear, guys?
Yeah, thanks. It's doing well. Thank you.
Right. So. And right, and guys, remember, see, please try to understand this concept right in depth, right? So, see, using this max length, min length is not that important. Important is how this is working behind the scene. Understanding that concept is important. Right? Just try to right understand the concept and use this. I'm sure you are using this required attribute. You are using this min length, max length attribute so far, right? That is fine. But you should remember, you should know if I'm using this data annotation attribute, then what is its impact on the database and what is its impact on the validation case? Is it impacting both the database and validation? Is it impacting only database, not validation? Is it impacting only validation, not database? So these are the things that what you need to understand. Some of the data annotation attributes are there, which is going to do right both means both the client side validation as well as the database side validation. Some of the attributes are there, which is going to do only database schema changes. Some of the attributes like min length, which is going to only do the right what I can say validation side, not the database schema changes, right? So these things you need to understand. Clear?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Anyone having any more question, guys?
Sir, this is not apart from today's class. So, sir, by seeing any project, how would I know like whether it is following a code first approach or database approach? Because everywhere we have a migrations, right?
Till now, I have not discussed the database first approach. Did you see that first or second session, right, where I have discussed the basic concept of entity framework code?
Yes, sir.
Are you attending the session from day one?
Yes, sir.
So if you are attending the session from day one, right, did you, when I explained this concept, EF core, code first approach, EF core, database first approach, so are you going through this diagram?
Yes.
Then what is the use of this EF core, code first approach, EF core, database first approach? Right?
Yeah,
If
with the code we'll create a database.
see, created the database is not important. Important is how you will decide, right? Whether I need to go with the code first approach and I need to go with the database first approach. We have a right
Yeah,
great
if we
discussion
don't
in that.
have a database with us, then
No,
sorry,
that is
if we,
completely wrong.
yeah,
First,
sorry,
ask the
sorry,
question.
reverse.
Ask the question yourself. Who is going to manage the database? You as a developer or the DBA team?
Our only. I mean, for code first approach, we will manage.
I'm not talking about database first approach, code first approach. I'm asking you in your company, in your project, right? Who is going to manage the database? You as a developer or a DBA team?
Me only.
If you are only going to manage the database, you need to go with the code first approach.
Okay.
If the database is going to be completely handled by the DBA team, then you need to go with the database first approach.
No, what I'm asking is, so we don't know. We have joined one new company. So we don't know who are managing over there and we don't have
See,
that info.
this is not a question, right? If you are joining a new company, you should know who is managing the database. This is not a question, right? Right? You can say that I don't know. If you are joining the company,
No, sir,
you can
but
brief you
I think
there.
so. I think so. He's
You
trying
can
to say that by looking at the code, can we decide like this is code first approach or
Exactly.
DB
Yeah,
approach?
exactly.
I think so. He's asking that way.
Yeah, definitely. So, see, in ASP.NET Core, you can say, right, whether it is a code first approach or a DB first approach. Why? Because both are going to be in the same manner only. You are having the same EF core DB context class and you are having the same, right, what I can say, entities. Because here we don't have that ADMX file,
Yeah, that's what
right?
my question is. Yeah.
Right. So the point that what you need to remember is if whether you are using the database first approach or whether you are using the code first approach, the concept, the logic, the core is right. Whatever you are writing is going to be remain same,
Okay. And in our
right?
curriculum, I haven't seen model first approach. So,
There is no model. See model. There is no model first approach at all in a right entity framework core,
okay.
right? So what I can understand is you are thinking about the old entity framework. Entity Framework 6.6. So this is Entity Framework core and it is completely based on you can consider code first approach. And there is no, right. So the right database first approach, what you are using, right? The EDMX file where you will provide the connection string. You can select these are the database I want to be created as part of my model, right? So this screen, this concept you will not find in Entity Framework core. Here we are going to something called reverse engineering, right? Using that approach, what we are going to do, we are right here. What I'm doing here, I'm creating the entities, and here I'm creating the DB context class, right? Object. So in database first approach, we have the database already created, right? And using the reverse engineering concept, right, which I'm going to discuss. Using the reverse engineering concept, I'm going to create the context object and the right entities. So here I'm creating in the DB first approach, that reverse engineering concept we are going to use to create the context object and model classes, right, based on the database. That's it. And the rest of the thing, it is going to be same. There's no differences, right? Whether you are using database first approach or code first approach, the code whatever you are going to write remains the same. And once you create the right database, and once you have the model, then again you can manage the things from your end only. So any new entity you want to create, you can create, no issue. Any database new object created, you can again do the reverse engineering that entity, right? Whatever the new table you have created, that entity is also going to be added in your code, right? So because till now I have not discussed anything related to database first approach. So whatever we are currently discussing, it is only code first approach. Clear?
Sir,
Right.
we want
Yes. Yes, please. Someone asking something?
Sir, I have one question if that person is not asking.
Yes, please.
This is related to my lazy loading. Sir, actually, my question is suppose, can I share my screen?
No.
Okay. Suppose like I'm getting the data where student is equal to db contacts dot students dot find one. So I got one record, correct? Now, if we are doing lazy loading, that time what we will do is like we will do some certain kind of setups and then we will get the data, right?
Right.
Like student dot first name, student dot last name,
No,
correct?
that is so you are complete. Student dot first name, student dot last name is not the data. So lazy means what?
Sorry. Student dot branch. Student dot
Yes,
branch. So that
yes.
time it will only one time query the result and then we can use it the way we want. So sir,
Yes.
my question is the way we are getting the student data, just db contact dot students dot find one. Similarly, we can get the data for branch also, right? In student now we have got the branch ID. And then again we can just get the data for branch.
Right.
Correct?
Correct.
But if we have to get the details for my other related entities like address or something for which we don't have a foreign key, so only for that purpose, this lazy loading will help us, right?
So lazy loading means what? Foreign key is not there means what? If foreign key is not there, then how that entity is related to your main entity? I'm asking you the question. If there is no foreign key, then how the other entity is related to your main entity?
No, no.
There should be some
What is
reason.
foreign
This is
key?
my dependent entity. This is not my principal entity. Suppose this is my
So whatever principal and dependent, that is different story altogether. For example, in this case, this is my address, so this is my teacher. If I'm loading this teacher entity, okay, let me put a not this one. Okay, let me open that lazy loading itself
yes,
altogether.
yes.
Right?
I'll
So
tell
in
you.
this case,
Mm,
this is my student entity, this is
mm,
my branch entity.
mm.
If there is no relationship, how this branch is related to student?
No,
Are
no,
you
no.
getting me?
I'll tell you what
There
I'm
is
trying.
no foreign key.
Mm.
If I'm not having this branch ID foreign key in the students table, then how I can say
Sir,
that
I'll tell you my
branch is
question. I'll tell you my question. When you are getting only student data, that time you will get the records from
branch ID?
student ID till branch ID, correct? Now, with the help of branch ID, I can get the branch details, correct? For my student
Correct.
ID equal to 1. Now,
Right.
Now for the same student ID equal to 1, I can get the details for my address. So one time I'm hitting the database. One time there will be query, select query, correct? So my question is, whenever we are doing lazy loading, that time also same thing happens. First time I'm getting the data for my student from student ID till branch ID. Then next time, what we are doing student dot branch, right? So there will be just one query and I'll get the details for my branch and then I can use it console.writeLine or whatever. So there will be just 1 DB hit select query. Now similarly, I can get the data for my address, just 1 DB hit. So what is the difference between the first one, what I said, and the now this lazy loading thing?
Right. See, in the past case, using the your main entity object, you are accessing the branch and addresses.
No.
How no? See, if I'm using
No,
student data
she's
branch,
No.
saying only whenever we are loading related entities by using lazy loading, it will check for the only once and it will retrieve the data, right?
Correct.
So without using that also, she already got the branch ID
Details.
while
that is
retrieving
what
the
I'm saying. If I'm not using the lazy loading concept, by taking this branch ID, I can also fetch the branch information. I can
Correct.
also fetch the address information. That is
Correct.
what you're doing. What is the
Yes.
difference
Yes.
between using lazy loading and using this explicitly right
Correct.
query? Right?
Yes.
So you just
Yes.
tell me if I'm only fetching this branch information using this branch
Branch
ID,
ID.
then how I can get the branch ID? What you are fetching is related to this main entity student. That might be a different branch. Instead of
No.
passing one, two,
No,
three,
sir.
five, you can pass
Sir,
anything.
I'll tell you. The example what you gave, that time you were getting the data for student ID equal to 1. That time I have branch ID also, which is also equal to 1.
That is
Now,
what I'm saying. My question is, while
Yeah.
you are explicitly calling, instead of a branch ID, I can pass anything.
Yeah, that branch ID might
no.
have other
I
students
while
also.
getting the branch details, I'll always give dbcontacts.branch where
I agree completely. I'm not
mm,
denying. So
mm,
what you are writing, context dot branch such that right, yes, such that right, branch ID equals to
correct.
whatever your main entity dot branch.
Student.student ID.
That what you are passing. But
Right.
in that case, you are getting one branch object,
Correct.
and that
I'll get.
is not related to this main entity. That is an independent object you are taking from the database. And that independent object, instead of passing this branch ID, I can pass 2, 3, 5. No issue. But if I'm accessing using this main entity student branch property, there is no chance that I can access any other branch information. But your approach, if I'm not passing this branch ID, is there any problem if I pass 2, if I pass 5? Instead of passing the student dot instead of filtering the data based on the student dot branch ID, if I pass some hard coded value, is there any problem?
Yeah, here she is missing one thing, sir. Actually, one
So
branch
in
ID
that
might
case, right?
have
And
so many
second thing, yes.
students.
Let me give you another clarity. So whatever branch you face, right, from the database, can you access that information using your main entity?
Where condition we can give student.branch ID?
So
Yeah, that
whatever
branch ID might have for other students also, right?
Yeah, so you
you
will
are
once you will go to branch
see,
record na. Yeah.
You are complete. So whatever the query, right, whatever context that branch is returning, at that time, what it is returning? One branch object it is returning, right?
Correct.
How you can compare, how you can manage, right? So that branch object you are getting as an independent object, right? And that object doesn't have any relation with your main student object. What I'm trying to make you understand, are you getting or not?
Yeah.
How these both are related? So in that case, you can pass anything instead of the student branch ID. I can pass anything and I can get the data. That is possible. But using lazy loading, if I'm calling this branch property using the student object, is there any chance that I can get any other student branch information?
I guess we will still get. I'll check that part.
You will get no doubt about it,
Mm.
right? If I'm pouring independent select statement to get the student ID, branch ID, address, there's no issue at all. But they are not lazy loaded concept. They are not related. Related means what? The entity what I'm facing, I access using my main entity. If I'm so if you are fetching that particular context dot branch such that whatever student ID you pass, once that return data, can I access that data using my main entity student? No. Why? Because that is an independent object at all. Clear or not? See,
Sir,
what I can suggest at this point of time is please share your code on the right
yes,
discussion.
yeah.
Because
Okay.
what I can understand is you are misleading between the related entity and the independent entity. So so you know what is the difference between the related entity and the independent entity? Okay, so let me give you one simple example. So this is my student entity, right? So here what I'm doing, I'm removing all these things. I'm putting only the branch entity. And creating this branch entity. And I'm just removing these teachers and all this thing, right? So that is what. And then what I'm doing here, students is there, and
Branch.
here I'm creating branch, right? And here I'm saying this is going to be branches, right? Fine. Now in the program.cs class file, let me remove all these things, right? So let me also remove these things so that right now. So inside these things, right, the context dot, I'm showing students, right? Suppose I'm accessing the first student, right? So here, right, std such that
So
std
here,
dot.
lazy loading is enabled.
I'm talking. Let assume lazy loading is enabled.
Okay. Because there is one more issue which I wanted to ask. That day you were also getting that issue, and then
Let me first clarify your doubt. So what I'm doing here, I'm fetching one student, right, whose ID is this one, right? So let me also, right, put this faster default method. So okay, let me instead of this where condition, let me use faster default async, and let me use the async keyword here. Wait. Okay, so it is not a static block. So let me put this one. So I have accessed this one, right? Let assume lazy loading is enabled. So what you are talking about, right? So you are talking about so context dot, right? Database dot, sorry, context dot
branches.
branches dot where or not where. Let assume first default, right? First default, and here you mean to say that I want to
Be
use it,
such that
right? So b such that
b dot
b
branch
dot
ID
branch ID
is equal
equals to
to student dot branch ID.
student dot branch ID. This is what you are talking, and here it is going to return a branch, right?
Right.
So now you just tell me, so whatever branch you written here, how is that related to student? Is there any relation between this branch and the student? This is an independent object, and this is an independent object. So now using the student entity, how I can access this branch properties?
So just now we have done this is equal to student dot
No,
branch.
that is fine. So here it is returning the branch. That is fine. But my question is, using this primary entity or main entity, can I access this branch information what you return in this query? Now, here, if I'm writing something like this, right? Suppose I'm writing here console.writeLine. So in this object, suppose I'm writing student dot branch dot right branch phone number.
Location.
In this case, whatever information you written here, that is stored inside this branch property, is this information going to be fetched here, displayed here?
Yes. Yes.
How you can say yes? Suppose, okay. So if you are saying here yes here, I'm writing here branch 2 also. I'm writing the same statement. Then what will happen in this case? So is there any relation between this entity and this entity?
No, sir.
You are getting my question now. So I cannot write any random statement and that is related to my primary entity. It is not like that. So here it is an independent object. This is an independent object. How you can say, right, that this is related to this is, don't think that I can access this information based on this branch ID means this is related to this entity. So now, if you access something like this, if this is both are same, then what about this one? So if I'm writing branch dot this one, so do you think that both are going to be same? If both are the same, then what is this object and what is this object?
So, but in database, suppose my branch
Data
ID is
is same. See, data is same, no doubt about it. But how it is related? You know what do you mean by related? Related means what? Using the main entity only, I need to access the related
right,
entity.
right.
So in this case, without using student entity, I'm accessing the data or not? So
Yes.
in this case, if I'm writing this statement, is it going to give me the branch phone number?
Yes.
But which student? Which student branch phone
No.
number is?
But sir, I'll just say one thing. Suppose for student,
So your basic is not clear. So
no,
for
no.
suppose, okay, okay, first tell me what is your query? Yeah.
Okay. For a student, suppose my branch ID is 1. 1 belongs to Mumbai. Okay. Now in database, in branch table, I have 1 equal to Mumbai. So I'm getting the correct detail. Now 1 Mumbai, though there is no connection, I agree, there is no connection of 1 Mumbai with only student ID equal to 1.
There is no connection means there is no related entity. There is no related entity means there is no lazy loading and no Igor loading. So lazy loading and Igor loading is only come into the picture whenever you are accessing the related entities using main entity only. So in this case, you are not accessing this as a related entity. You are accessing this as an independent entity. For example, if I remove this one, if I pass here branch ID, then I'm also getting the data, na?
Yes.
Then what is that means can I say this is related to any student? So in this
No.
case, let's assume the student ID, student branch ID is 1. So now also instead of passing student dot branch ID, so I can pass 1. So I can pass 1 means, do you think that this entity is related with this entity?
No.
Then how you can say, so this one means what? Internally, this is going to be student dot branch ID, right? Student dot branch ID. So, but when the query is going to be generated, at that time, the student dot branch ID, whatever value that is going to be replaced, that value let assume 1. So 1 means I can paste the branch information. Then once I paste the branch information, can you tell this branch belongs to which student?
Yeah, it can belong to many students, yes.
How it can be related to student entity? Is this branch related to this particular student?
No.
So means what? So related lazy loading, eager loading means what? Using the main entity only, I need to access the data.
Okay.
Student dot branch dot and the branch phone. Now I can say whatever the branch number and whatever the branch it is displaying, this is related to this student. Why? Because using the primary entity, main entity, I'm accessing the related entity. And whatever statement you are talking, this is independent. There is no relation, right?
Okay.
So getting the same data doesn't mean it is related.
Okay. And sir, one more question. I got your point. When we are enabling the lazy loading, that time when I'm not in debugging mode, it is giving me the correct select query, correct
So
result.
because that is
But
not work. So that debugging will not work lazy loading, right? If you want to work with lazy loading, please don't debug the application. If you are debugging, then you will get the data as expected as
Yeah,
equal.
yeah. Because what is happening now, like suppose you are getting student data, okay, line number 14. Line number 15, if I'm writing student dot branch, and if I'm debugging, suppose 14th line, I'm debugging my
That is what
code.
I'm
If you,
saying. That is what I'm saying. Lazy loading
okay,
will not work when you are running the application in debugging mode.
okay. No, it's working, sir, but
Not
in line number
working.
14, in line number 14 itself, I'll get my result. I'll get my result for branch, address, everything. So
What
means
I'm
it is
saying.
not working. Yeah, internally it's not working. Okay.
Working. That is what I'm saying. Na. If you are debugging the application with lazy loading, it will not work. You will get, see, whenever the line number 14 is executed, at that time only you will get the related branch and all these
Yeah,
things. If
right. Right.
that is
Mm,
debugging, so don't write debug.
okay.
That is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Clear?
Yeah, because for explicit we were getting null for address, branch, and other related entities.
It's